Good afternoon and welcome to the Multicultural Media Online Conference hosted by the New South Wales Ministry of Health, Multicultural Health Communication Service with the support of Multicultural New South Wales. I'm Jesusa Helaratne, Deputy Director of the Multicultural Health Communication Service, and I am your moderator for these sessions. And today I like to welcome our guest who are very special today because we have a really important topic to discuss. We're pleased to have with us Dr. Rachel D'Souza, pediatric burn surgeon at the Children's Hospital at Westmead. Dr. Rachel, thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
And also we have with us a person who's joined us many times here at the Multicultural Media Online Conference, Lisa Yates, Manager of the Food Policy Unit of the Ministry of Health. Lisa, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks, Jess. Good to see you again.
Lisa is also a qualified dietitian, so it's great to find out some tips in keeping our children and families safe during winter for food safety. We'll be talking about how to prevent burns in children while practicing food safety for the family, in particular for the little ones. Before we start, we'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which we are all meeting from today. We pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and pay that respects to Aboriginal colleagues who may be joining us in this session today. And we also want to extend that respect to multicultural and refugee communities joining in this session. And it is World Refugee Week as well, to acknowledge the week. Okay, well, we're about to start the session. It is one of the common things that we don't even realize. In 2024, more than 400 children across New South Wales sustained a scald burn from hot food or liquids and needed specialized care from Paediatric Burns Unit at the Children's Hospital at Westmead already this year. And more than 120 children have needed care for these type of burns. Dr. Rachel, what are the common causes of burn injuries in children?
Well, in children, the most common cause of burns that we see are scald burns. So that's from like hot liquids, tea, coffee. And it usually is happening in the toddler age group. These children are, inquisitive. They're starting to explore their environment. And these hot liquids are extremely, dangerous when they do pull them down on themselves and can cause serious injuries. Probably the next most common type of burn that we see will be a contact burn through multiple different sources. So sometimes, like in the wintertime, people are using fireplaces more often. So if you touch the fireplace door, it's very hot. And the thing with toddlers are they don't have that immediate reaction to come off of it. And so they often stay. And that causes quite significant burns, and obviously a very important area in the body, the hands, which need to, grow for the rest of their lives. And also things like, hot irons, heaters, stovetops, exactly. Yep. And so that's probably the second most common thing that we see. And then after that, thankfully not as common, we see things like flame injuries, so, caused by fires. And so thankfully we don't see these as common as the other ones because they're often worse or deeper injuries.
Yeah, we had a session in the Multicultural Media Online Conference on fire and safety with the fire and rescue team, and they actually said there's several areas of concern when it comes to fire, and the kitchen is one of those areas very much where we cook, we always converge, we meet together, and that's one of the places that's quite scary as well if you think about it.
I guess they probably emphasize needing good fire alarm systems and, fire safety in the kitchen, related to having, accidental flames and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I wanted to check with you in terms of what are the burn injuries and why it's important to send a message for parents to be vigilant around open flames. And as you said, there's the kitchen, but there's also the fire, and in terms of where the flames can come in when it's trying to keep the house cool.
Definitely. I mean, a burn injury just in itself, is when you get damage to the skin, and it can be caused by different mechanisms. As we said, heat's one of them, but also electricity can cause significant burns. And you often don't see much on the outside, but there could be deeper injury associated with electrical burns. Radiant heat can cause burn injuries. Also, chemicals can cause chemical burn injuries. Friction that we see sometimes. So things like treadmills, vacuum cleaners, even when you just, skid on the ground and you get a friction burn like gravel rash, even that can cause damage to the skin.
Mm,
But in particular, children are at more risk, let's say, than adults because their skin is thinner and it can burn at like a lower temperature than adults can. So something that we think might not be that dangerous, like the cup of tea falling on ourselves, or we spill a little bit of hot water on ourselves, it wouldn't be that bad. But for children, it could actually be deep enough that they require skin grafting, and then they're going to have lifelong scars,
mm,
left with them. So it's
mm.
important in particular to protect the children, from these injuries. Um, we see about, as you said before, 500 children with these injuries at our hospital, and 50% of these children will be under the age of 2. And so, it just happens in a second. And I see every day how bad, parents feel. And I feel horrible for them when they have to bring their child in to the hospital with a burn injury. But luckily and thankfully, I also get to see them recover, and get better.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's so important to remember because it's just keeping the children safe. But then there's so many people taking care of the family right now. There's intergenerational families, there's grandparents, so it is a messaging that we have to give the parents. Now, I wanted to ask Lisa, having your kitchen would be your specialty in terms of food safety. It's not just food safety, but it's also burn safety, isn't it?
That's right. We were talking earlier that, cooking is a lifelong skill. So we do need to teach our children to cook, but we need to do it in a safe way that it's not just sharp objects, but it's also hot ones. And so, yes, supervision is absolutely essential when you're in the kitchen. And we do want kids as they get older to develop cooking skills. And this time of the year, we love our winter warming kind of dishes, soups and stews and casseroles and curries, all those lovely things. But they are basically hot liquids and therefore can definitely hurt themselves. And for older kids who might come home after school and have 2-minute noodles, they're dealing with boiling hot water. So one tip I would absolutely suggest is that all kids should eat their food at the table. And if there are any spills, then it's more likely to go onto the table and not onto their lap, which I'm sure is a highly burn area as well as hands.
Totally. Like, try and send this message as much as we can, but definitely do not eat noodles or hot food in your lap because, the water is going to spill on a very sensitive area. So it spills in your groin and your thighs. And hot noodles have it has starch in the water, and it keeps the heat more intense than just, let's say water without the starch. And the burns are quite significant, like often requiring skin grafting. So, yeah, very important message.
Who knew 2-minute noodles can be that dangerous?
That's so yummy.
Yes,
Exactly.
who knew? Now, I wanted to ask anyone who's joining us online, please ask your questions if you have any, because we have Lisa and Dr. Rachel to answer your questions. And that is really interesting about when you said the hot noodles is that it carries starch, so it just keeps the heat. That's quite interesting.
Any thicker fluid will keep the heat more. So
Mm.
like bolognese sauce, soups, the starchy liquid in the noodles.
Yeah.
I think it keeps more heat in the fluid, and so can, keeps the temperature hot on the skin for longer, and then makes the injury deeper.
So, Dr. Rachel, what are the best ways, and what are your tips to prevent burns in children?
To prevent burns, I guess, is well, with the toddler group, you want to make sure that you keep tea, coffee, cups completely out of reach for them. So you'd be surprised how resourceful, kids can be, but you want to make sure that you keep it well away from them. So like at the back of a counter where they definitely can't reach it instead of on the table. If you have a table, you want to make sure that there's not like a tablecloth that they can pull off. When you have cords, for example, like to kettles and stuff like that, you want to make sure that the cords are, not dangling or at reach for them, because, that's another thing that they pull, and that can cause, quite a significant amount of hot liquid to leak on them. As we mentioned before, like if they're consuming hot things, don't let them eat them in their lap. So have it on a table or on a surface where they're eating it. Make sure they're supervised. I guess these are some of the things in the kitchen, but then also We generally recommend not using, hot water bottles. Sometimes we see hot water bottles that are very old in the house that are used, especially in wintertime. And, there could be cracks, or these get filled with very hot water. And when they burst, they cause quite significant injuries. When you have fireplaces or stoves, even, it's important to keep a barrier so the children can't reach, that area. So you would put like a guard around a fireplace, or sometimes there's a guard that you can put around your stove so they can't reach it. I think these are important things just to be mindful of, so to make sure that, we're doing all that we can to minimize the risk to children.
So I guess the question is now, which is important, what can parents do if something does happen, and what are the measures that they can take immediately to reduce the severity of these burns?
I'm so glad you asked that, because that's a very important message to get out. The only effective thing that we can do is 20 minutes of cool running water. So basically, like the longer the heat's on the skin, the more damage it's going to do. So if the child's wearing clothes, take the clothes off. Especially, we don't think about this, but a nappy can hold a lot of water in it. So take the nappy off if the child's wearing a nappy, jewelry off. And then you want to have the child under cool running water, whatever part's affected by the burn, for 20 minutes. So, you put your timer on your phone and make sure you do it for the 20 minutes. It really can make a huge difference. So, I have had children, the same type of injury, a similar thing that happened. One of them had perfect first aid. And that, let's say they didn't need skin grafting and they healed within 2 weeks, and then they didn't have significant scarring. Where another child had like toothpaste put on the burn, and it deepened it all, and they needed to have skin grafting to a significant amount of the burn, and they will have those scars for life. Like, they'll never go away, and just that simple thing that we
Wow.
can do can make a huge difference. Some of the other things that people put on burns are like, we've seen Tiger Balm, oils, butter, toothpaste, but like, studies have shown the only effective thing is the cool running water. Of course, your child's going to be screaming, and so you might not be able to do it in a full 20 minutes, which is fine because it's effective up to 3 hours from the time of burn. So you can do 5 minutes, take a break, comfort the child, do 5 more minutes, take a break, as long as you get that 20
Wow.
minutes in. It's super important.
So does that mean like the tap in the sink, or are we talking like the shower or the bath?
Yeah, any of these things will be fine.
Okay.
I mean, if it's not feasible, like, you can just keep filling a bucket and pouring on the child,
Right.
so you have that cool running
Wow.
water. It doesn't need to be freezing. Ice is not good. Just cool running water, and if it's a small child, keep the rest of them covered if it's just like an arm, or if it's just a leg that needs to be cooled. And if you're unsure, call 000.
Yeah,
And
to
if you
call
go to
Health
a
Direct,
hospital,
right?
they'll do the cooling with you.
So they can call Health Direct to call that number, because if they needed support and if they weren't sure, they can call Health Direct.
Percent. I mean, it's so stressful for a parent when this happens, and when you see the blistered skin and you're stunned and you don't know what to do. So definitely use those services to help.
You
That's the
mentioned,
first thing you can do. That's the most important.
yes, and if you needed Health Direct, to call 1-800-022-222, and if you needed a language support, you can call TIS at 131-450, or call Health Direct, and they can find and they can link you up with a translator. But Dr. Rachel, you did mention about all those other alternatives. These are things that when we were growing up, I remember when I was growing up, oh, if you have a burn, put toothpaste. And even tomatoes. I mean, there are so many things that people have ideas of, and you hear everywhere, oh, well, put this, put that. And you're saying it's just water that's going to be the safest bet.
One thing that I can convey today: cool running water for 20 minutes. That's exactly what you have to do. All the other things that we learned, like, over the years, they've all been shown not to be helpful. Um, And, I'm surprised more and more why different things that, like, our moms have told us to do, for the burn, but really the only thing is the 20 minutes cool running water.
And I guess for a lot of things, a lot of the cultural community or multicultural communities, and from diverse backgrounds, there's always been something that people get advice for, and sometimes maybe it works, but then as the safest thing is water, and there's always going to be a tap around. So I think that's the most important um, tip. Like you said, Dr. Rachel, if there's one tip, I remember if there was a burn, That's what I do, and I will never forget that from this time on. And now,
Oh, Lindsay's
Lisa,
very
yeah,
happy.
Lisa, in terms of food safety, and you were already, and when we were saying what else do you put, butter was something that Lisa said, because that's clearly Lisa is all about food. So, in terms of food
That's what I
safety.
remember being told. Yeah. Although that and cucumbers, but yeah.
I know it's just so many things. So just remember for everyone, water is the best way to prevent burns and or to keep it reduce all the dangers of it. Lisa, what is your advice for food safety for the whole family, particularly for children? You mentioned a lot of other things in terms of keeping it safe, microwaves. What is it that we should be wary of, especially the community, to just remind them, especially during winter?
Mentioned the microwave. We didn't mention that before. The microwaves will heat food up, but not in a consistent manner. So it's always good to stir the food quite carefully to make sure there's no hot spots, and then to test the temperature of the food before you're serving it, because it can get quite hot indeed in certain spots within a container. So that would be one thing. Um, from a food safety perspective, funny thing is, yes, it is cold outside, it is winter, but lunch boxes still need to be kept cold. So if you're preparing your lunch for work or for school, you still want to have an insulated lunchbox or lunch bag. Everything inside is kept nice and fresh and cold until lunchtime. So that could be just a frozen popper or a refreezable brick. Or if you can, put your lunchbox or lunch bag in the fridge. That's just standard food safety practice to keep
Mm.
food fresh and safe. Um, and I recently saw something on the news about people are still a bit confused about use by and best before dates. So I thought it'd be good to kind of just clarify
Mm.
that. So a use by date on a product, for instance, milk, is the date that you must consume it by, because after that time, bacteria could increase to grow and it could actually make you sick. A good test is just give it a smell. If it has a bit of an off smell, then you know that it is either before or even after your use by date. You obviously wouldn't use it. Um, Whereas a best before date simply means that the quality of the food may change, but it is still safe to eat. It's not going to make you sick. So maybe the color isn't the same. Maybe the taste might be different. The quality isn't as good. So that's the difference. You definitely keep tabs of your use by dates, but best befores, it's still probably okay. It may not just taste as good.
Now, when you say best before, and I think this is really important, best before, okay, it's still okay, but best before, but how many days is it that when you can not eat it?
I guess that's the tricky thing. If it's a processed product, then unfortunately it probably does have preservatives, additives in it, which will extend the shelf life. So it really does depend on the product when it will actually be off. But for the most part, we use by dates on fresh food. So whether it's dairy products, red meat, chicken, fish, those kinds of things, generally, if you buy them in the supermarket, they will have a use by date on them. Yeah, best before it's a bit tricky because it does depend on the product, depend on what's in it as to how
Mm.
long you can keep it after that date. I went through the pantry cupboard recently and found something that had been there since 2023, and I figured that probably was not going to be good to eat.
Best
So
before,
yes, yes, but we,
yes.
we do want to avoid food waste. So in these cost of living times, we probably do want
Mm.
to keep tabs on our best before dates as well. Yeah.
And I guess that's a reminder for people when you should be checking your pantry and the best before dates and best use dates, because sometimes it's the new year, that's when you do it, but maybe it is good to check every few months.
Well, I'd actually do it every time you go to shop. I mean, if you're
Mm.
planning your meals for the week and you're making a shopping list, go and check what's in the pantry. You don't want to buy something that you've already got. So be a bit more organized. Have your list of foods, your shopping list that you want to buy, and check your fridge and pantry first to see if there's something that you've already got that you can use. And that will also help you look for your best before dates.
And I think I've had this question as well, is when you do put in food in the freezer. So when can you use it? So if you're putting food in the freezer and you want to use it, and but it's already used by date, can you tell us more about how that works in terms of safety, food safety?
That's a good question. Yes. So, I mean, if it's fresh meat, for instance, you would use it by the use by date, but certainly you can have frozen meat for a longer period of time. It does vary depending on the meat, but the one thing I always do is just mark up the container or mark up your plastic bag or whatever it is that you've stored in. You might even use like a Ziploc bag and write on that. Um, Doing a lot of cooking in advance is really helpful, especially if you're working full time and you've got to come home and prepare a meal. Having some, soups and stews and casseroles and curries that you've already prepared and left them in the fridge is a really great idea as well.
Is there like a recommendation on how long you can keep it for? Like 3 months, 6 months? Like
it varies depending on off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact dates for the exact foods, but if everyone's interested, we can certainly supply that information and pop it into the chat afterwards if that's helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. We will put when we send out the recording, we'll put a link to that information. Dr. Rachel, do you see a lot of people who do have problems when they come in through with regard to food safety when it's not been when they haven't been well with food?
Poisoning. Luckily
Yes,
for
food
me,
poisoning.
I don't. They probably would come to the emergency department and get treated through there. I usually, unless they're very sick, I do pediatric surgery and burns. They will come to me.
That's really interesting because there's food poisoning is something that happens a lot to a lot of communities, so that the food safety is really crucial. And because it's winter, what are the messages that Lisa, what's the message that you have, especially when winter, you put the food out and because it's cool, so it's okay to just keep it out on the pantry, or do you really have to refrigerate the food still? Especially, how the messages are different when it comes to summer and winter.
We should just stick to what you do in summer is going to be great for winter, and that way you'll never forget or change up your routine. So certainly you don't want to leave things out on the bench for too long. Or I was actually even thinking if you're outdoor having picnics or bonfires, which is another burn hazard, you still want to have foods that are safe. So you'd take your esky with you and keep things nice and cold when you're outside. So yeah, just stick to the same routines that you would have in the summertime. It would be the same to keep things safe in winter as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, Dr. Rachel, just talking about picnics and when you're going away and going out, and to prevent fire, burns as well when you're going for picnics. Is there something that you need to remember? Is there something you need to pack, or just keep as a toolkit for parents?
Practicing good fire safety,
Yes.
when you're out camping. Especially, I would say supervision is probably going to be the most important aspect, with regards to fire and younger kids. You can, I guess, get a sense if they understand the danger of fire. Like a 2-year-old is not going to understand the danger, but as you get older, my children are 7 and 9, and they would definitely understand that, the danger with fire. And then I guess the fire becomes a little bit safer because they understand, how badly they can get hurt by it. But there's going to be another group of children, and it's probably important for us to talk to them as well, because teenagers can also do silly things. So sometimes we see fires from like stuff getting thrown in the fire, like aerosol cans, because they want an explosion to happen. So I think it's probably still important to talk to our older children to make sure that they have safe practices around fire, because even that can cause like really bad injuries. A flash flame can cause airway injuries, can cause facial burns, and can be bad as well and require grafting. So I think all around, just practicing good, safe standards around fires is probably the best thing we can do.
Yeah, and it seems like you said before, the kids, in terms of when the kids skin is thinner and more delicate, where and more thick, clearly they get more hurt deeply and at a lower temperatures than adults. So in terms of how we guide adults as well, and the children, there's this, it's just making sure that we advise that caution, to stay cautious, especially with grandparents as well. How people are not moving too fast. I mean, it's cold, it's hard. So I guess it's just having the conversation and making sure that the information is shared all around.
Another thing I just thought of is you want to make sure that like you have for children fire retardant clothing. So certain clothing have like a label that tells you that they're more fire retardant than, than some fabrics. So potentially if you're out at a bonfire making, you don't want something that's highly flammable with you that they're wearing. And if you do happen to catch on fire, stop, drop, and roll. Like you want that heat extinguished as soon as possible, because the longer the heat's on the skin, the more damage that's going to occur.
Well, thank you. There's a question here. What if you burn your lips or your gums with hot food or water? What would you do? And what should you do?
Luckily, our mouth area and our oral mucosa has very good blood supply to it. I'm sure most of us have eaten a hot piece of pizza and some of the skin on the roof of your mouth has come off a little bit and it's uncomfortable. But for the most part, those are going to heal with, in a short amount of time by themselves. For adults and even for toddlers, if they put something like a hot liquid in their mouth and it's too hot, they usually don't swallow it. They spit it out. And so usually the amount of time that the hot liquid's on the mouth is minimal. And so luckily we don't see bad burns. Where we can see worse burns is a toddler that gets into a chemical like drain cleaner and they think it's a candy and they put it in their mouth. They can get intraoral burns that can be quite bad. And they can also, worse than that, get burns down their food pipe, their esophagus, which can be quite severe.
Well, thank you, Heidi, for that question, and hope that that answered your question. I guess that's just making sure that what you do have at home, you know what the dangers that they can be for young children. Now, Lisa, we're almost running out of time. Anything tips that you have for food safety for parents, grandparents, and with young children around, especially in winter?
Actually, it's good. I think that grandparents who spend so much time taking care of kids now, that they are very familiar with everything that we've said today, and perhaps just knowing that it's 20 minutes of cold water and not anything else on skin, I think would be really helpful from that point of view. But if they're cooking, they just need to be conscious of the fact that they've got little kids around, which on a day-to-day basis, they may not get used to that. So all those things about having things away, keeping handles of saucepans pushed, turned away, all those kinds of things I think are really valuable. But yeah, grandparents need to remember that they've got little ones around, so they probably need to change their practices than they used to.
I also wanted to check in, Dr. Rachel. You said about clothes and what's are flammable, and that could be the same with the ones that you use for pot pans, right? And also for toys. And is that something that we should be very careful about too? Because those are materials that what materials we use at home is something that could catch fire and could be dangerous.
Definitely. I think probably more so than avoiding, having these toys is to make sure that there's no flames around, where the kids are playing, so that decreases the risk. But I don't know about the, material safeties too much, but in general, I think most toys that would be made for under 3-year-olds should be generally, a more fire retardant material than not.
So, Dr. Rachel, any last words that you'd like to tell the community, people joining us online, and those who will be watching this recording as well?
I think the number one message I want to get out is like the most effective thing you can do is 20 minutes of cooling. And, if something does happen, then I know that at least we've done everything. And then the family can also feel kind of better knowing that they did everything they could to get the best outcome for their child. So I think that would be the number one message that I'd want to get out there.
And Lisa, last words?
For more information about healthy eating and nutrition, you can go to the Healthy Living website for New South Wales Health. We have a load of fantastic new recipes on there as well, which are low cost, easy, don't require a lot of equipment. So yeah, there could be some wonderful winter warming recipes there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rachel D'Souza and Lisa Yates, dietitian from New South Wales Ministry of Health. And we really appreciate all your support and also coming on today to provide that information for us. So please if you have any questions, please send us an email and we can reach out to Lisa and also to Dr. Rachel. some of the tips and resources are online, given to us by our multicultural cultural health communication service team members on the chat, but we'll also send you a recording of this session with some more information. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you stay safe. Run that 20 minutes of water if there is a burn. Thank you, Dr. Rachel, and keep your community and family safe this winter. We hope to see you again next time. Have a great afternoon.